Greetings, dear friends. Welcome to this live stream for Empty Cloud Monastery, New Jersey. Just checking there's a difficulty with the streaming, the live streaming. I hope that those who are viewing on Facebook will be able to see. Just have to hope that any technical glitches get sorted. So I'd like to begin by paying homage to our teacher, the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. So welcome to this live stream today, where I'm going to be talking about the essence of the practice. What are we practicing for? What is the purpose? What is the goal of our practice? And I'd like to refer to and suggest you reading a couple of suttas from Majjhima Nikaya, the Heartwood suttas, which I posted in the chat here. These suttas both speak about the essence, Sara, the Heartwood, the core of the practice. And they're so helpful, these two suttas, because the Buddha takes us through all the aspects of the path and the ways in which we can be distracted. We can go off on a tangent. We can get caught up with our sense of progress. And in doing so, we can fall away from the path. And one of these suttas, the greater simile of the Heartwood, Mahasaropama Sutta, Majjhima number 29, takes place just after Devadatta, the Buddha's cousin, had actually tried to kill him. He tried to kill the Buddha, to do away with the Buddha, and to take over as leader of the Sangha. So what a prime example, friends, of somebody who was faithfully following the path of practice and then got caught up in some craziness, in some conceit, in some serious distraction, and lost all the aspects of the path in attempting to hurt and harm a Buddha. How shocking. And so it was after this event where Devadatta actually tried in a number of ways to kill the Buddha. And finally, Devadatta had given up and left in order to then try and start another group, a schism in the Sangha. And he then went away and he got a whole load of disciples to follow him and created all sorts of problems for himself and for them. So the Buddha was at Vulture's Peak at this point, and he gave this teaching to speak about the ways in which we must be on our guard to avoid falling off the path. And, it's really very salutary, to recognize that we may feel we've got it sussed, and intellectually it's not difficult, really, to understand the Buddha's teachings. We read the suttas, we take in these teachings, we apply them. It's not so difficult, one would think, and yet we can be caught up by our ignorance, by the defilements, of greed, of hatred, and of confusion. and we can find ourselves in some strange situations. So we need to be very aware of this and to consider this sutta and the sutta that follows it, the similes of the Heartwood suttas that are, pointing to the essence of the practice and redirecting our gaze, redirecting our attention again and again to remind ourselves, to straighten our view, to guide ourselves so that we are aiming, at all times for the final goal, which is the complete liberation from all greed, hatred, and delusion. So the Buddha, the stages, the progress that can be made on the path. And he's specifically referring to mendicants, to those who've gone forth, but this, of course, applies to all of us. So first of all, the Buddha speaks about the danger for a mendicant or for any of us, friends, the danger of gain, of honor, of renown. So, we mendicants can give up all the status, worldly status, our careers, our position in society, and we become homeless beggars. How helpful is that? What a fortunate perspective we can then have on samsara, on the danger of wealth, the danger of status, the danger of being influential, the danger of having the power to buy and get and acquire whatever we want. So as lay people, also it's necessary to be very aware of these things and to see how we can get caught up in the sense of being somebody, in the sense of control, the sense of empowerment that our positions in society can offer us. And just to very humbly be aware of that, remembering the Buddha's fundamental teaching on generosity, giving away, that it's very wholesome for us to balance out our sense of being somebody in society by giving up our possessions, our wealth, our privilege, so to not hold to these things. For a mendicant in this sutta, the Buddha's speaking about how, when you go forth and you become, in a sense, in terms of society, the lowest in society, even so, there is a danger because we can, as monastics, be revered, honored, held up by lay people particularly, or by one another as a great person, a great being, a great teacher, someone attained, someone. And honor and gain in terms of the support for the requisites can come flowing in for us. And these things can create obstacles for monastics, just as for all of us. If we identify with our good fortune and we make it me and mine, and we develop conceit, we develop a sense of being special, being great, being important, being anything at all. So the Buddha initially points to, in these suttas, he points to these dangers, the danger of elevation, of status in any form, of being respected, revered, honored, being privileged, having anything that we cleave to that is enjoyable for us, that gives us a sense of uplift, pride, empowerment, a sense of being okay. Let's be aware that these imposters can trick us into identifying as somebody, as something. And the Buddha described these dangers as like the twigs and branches of a great tree. So you come to the path of practice, and we want to get to the heartwood, get to the core, get to the essence of what this practice is for, what it is about, and what is the goal of this practice. And the Buddha said this is like the heartwood. But in order to get to the heartwood, we have to be careful to make our way through, all the layers. And this danger of getting attached to being somebody privileged, to being somebody special, to gain honor, renown, and privilege of any sort. This is like making our way through the branches and twigs and not grasping at these, not getting confused by them, not getting caught up, not settling for this level of achievement, of attainment. And then as we come into the practice and learn how to practice well, we of course develop our sila. We understand that in order to make any progress on the path, it's essential for us to be harmless. We want to be free from remorse. We want to be able to relax because we're not caught up in agitation over things that we've done that are not skillful, that are not wholesome, that are harmful, either harming ourselves or harming those beings around us. And so sila develops, and we become very interested in this. And we want to keep the 5 precepts, don't we? We want to avoid any harm, but certainly avoid killing, stealing, lying, being dishonest, insincere. We want to avoid intoxicants because of the dangers that they cause. They push us into breaking all the other precepts if we're not careful. We want to avoid any kind of sexual misconduct, so to respect others, to cherish the life around us in all these different ways, to avoid any kind of oppression or harm or dis-ease for others, so that we are safe. There's nothing about us that is to be feared. We are kind, we are compassionate, we have respect and care and compassion for the world around us. So this is another great gift of the Buddha's teachings and of the spiritual path. And we find this in all the traditions, of course, this encouragement to be well, to be happy through our conduct, through our speech, and through our minds, purifying and becoming really wholesome, really good, really upright. And here in this sutta, the Buddha says, yes, of course, this is a good thing. This is an aspect of path, but let's not settle just for that. Let's recognize that virtue is like the outer bark of a great tree. We're aiming for the heartwood, and we can recognize it's essential for a great tree, to have the outer bark, the protective layers surrounding it. So good, so necessary, and yet we don't want to stop there. We don't want to rest in the very peaceful and happy states that we can experience through our life of virtue, of goodness, generosity, and harmlessness. And we can notice how, we can become attached to our goodness through the lens of observing how we relate to others, friends. Just as in this sutta, the Buddha points out that the danger of attachment to virtue is that we can start to laud ourselves and disparage others. We can start to feel good about ourselves. We can start to identify with this good person, with this entirely wholesome person, or this person who's doing their very best to develop in virtue and goodness. And when we get attached to this person, we can notice how this can manifest through our attitude to others being one of judgment. They are not so good. We can look around us in the world, look at the news, look at people we work with, people that we even live with, even our family, and we can notice how they may not be as virtuous as we are. And we can notice perhaps a slight sense of superiority, even certainly a sense of separation. We can notice when we read and hear about awful things happening in the world around us that the mind will incline very often toward judging those who are not keeping precepts, those who are behaving in harmful ways. It's so good to appreciate this inclination, which is very, you could say, natural in us, to have a sense of what's right and wrong and to want to apply that to the world around us is very natural. It's good. It's a way of learning Dharma, learning, growing in wisdom. But when we notice the mind that is judging, criticizing, when we notice any kind of negativity towards others, we can get very interested in that and notice how there can be vestiges here of attachment to our own virtue, to our own goodness. And it's good to be good, but it's good to recognize that goodness is not me, it's not mine, it's not myself. There is nothing we can identify with here. We can only allow goodness to flow and to keep developing and to be letting go constantly of any sense of being somebody at all. So the Buddha said, yes, that virtue, of course, crucial on the path of practice, is like the outer bark of a tree, of a great tree. We don't want to settle for that. We want to aim for the heartward, friends. And as we develop on the path of practice, we develop our meditation practice, and we start to purify this mind and heart. We start to wake up to reality. And in doing so, we develop stillness in our practice. We develop samadhi. We begin to appreciate peace, deeper well-being still than the well-being of a person who's living a good life. This is the well-being of a peaceful mind. The appreciation that there is much to be experienced beyond the thinking mind. That the thinking mind, all its commentary, can be quiet, can stop, can fall away, and there can be profound states of stillness and peace, which, you know, the well-being, the bliss, the ecstasy, one could say, of a still mind, a peaceful heart, is beyond anything that we experience in our everyday lives in samsara. So through meditation, we start to touch into deeper realities, great peace, great stillness. And the Buddha said, this samadhi is like the inner bark of the tree. This is not the goal of our practice. This is a stage in our practice to come to these experiences of letting go, profoundly letting go, when we are able to let go of the hindrances, when we have moments or even periods of time when we're not assailed by desire. There's no aversion in the mind. There's no dullness. There's no restlessness. We're not caught up in doubt. We're simply present, and it is peaceful, and there is well-being. There is piti, there is rapture, sukha, contentment, deep happiness, and upekkha, equanimity. These things we can begin to experience in our meditation practice as we follow the Buddha's teachings, his guidance. He was constantly, wasn't he, encouraging us to meditate. Go find a quiet place and sit and bring the attention inward and see what's here for us. And so this peace is a very important, very natural and good development in our path of practice. And yet, the Buddha said this is like the inner bark. We haven't got anywhere near the center of the great tree. We're still around the edges. And this is really important for us to recognize, because how easy is it for us to get caught up in peace so that we just want more of that? I just want to go on retreat again. I just want to meditate. I don't want to have to deal with all the humdrum responsibilities and busyness of everyday life. That is inferior in some way. And we can get to feel that when we're meditating, this is it. And this peace and well-being is what we want to continue to hit upon, to bring about, to, organize the world so that the conditions are such that I can experience this peace and well-being. Big mistake. If we get caught at this point, then we're really missing the path and we're not going to get anywhere close to the heartwood. How can we notice? We can notice the tendency to make peace more important than compassion, than relationship, to be that sort of sense of turning away from the world with a kind of disgust that is not entirely wholesome, the wish to avoid, the wish to bypass, the wish to just be free from. There's a tinge of aversion there. When we're seeking peace and stillness, we can turn away from the world in a way that's full of aversion or tinged subtly with aversion. We can notice that. We can notice the desire for peace as it arises in the heart and not let ourselves fall for this stage of the path and make it the end of our path. I'm really guilty of this. When I started meditating back in my 20s, I experienced a little bit of peace after a few days on a retreat, my first retreat, and I became completely caught up in wanting to recreate that because it was so delicious. It was so extraordinary. It was so rare. I'd never experienced such well-being before. And so I just wanted more of it. And that's a very natural inclination, but what we want to do in our practice, what we want to observe is that peace gradually grows to some extent or to a great extent, and we need to treat this as yet another manifestation of samsara, friends. We don't want to incline towards that peace. We don't want to cleave to it. We don't want to immerse ourselves in it and make it me, make it mine, identify with it as my achievement, attainment, right, the state that I am experiencing. If we attach to peace, then we're losing so much this path. We're caught up. We're caught in a very pleasant place. It's like being caught in a devaloka, in a heavenly realm. And yet we're caught. And yet if we're wise, we don't want to settle for that. We want to take away this inner bark and come closer to the heartwood. And we can notice, often the best way to notice if we're getting caught up in states that we can experience in our meditation is what happens when we lose them. If someone comes in the room when I'm meditating and I get upset because they've disturbed my peace, if I want my children to shut up so that I can enjoy my peace, if we find ourselves disparaging others on account of their agitation, their chaotic minds, their inability to be quiet, to be able to enjoy silence, then we can start to notice there is some attachment here. I am making myself into somebody, the peaceful one, the meditator, the one who can attain samadhi, and I'm subtly or overtly disparaging others, making some sense of separation, and therefore losing the sense of path. And then if we continue to practice, we start working with samadhi, we work with the stillness and work with the peace, and we notice that it arises due to causes and conditions. And sometimes the conditions are present for samadhi and sometimes they're not. And we learn to not make a problem about that. We let go of peace. We let go of the sense that this is the goal, because it's not. We're not seeking peace in our practice. We're seeking freedom from all suffering. It's a different aim. Peace is like a byproduct, and it's something we do not want to then gravitate towards, but rather just recognize when peace arises. That is so good, that is so helpful, and I continue to practice for liberation. This can translate in our meditation practice into a willingness to not immerse ourselves in samadhi and stillness, but rather to keep bringing the attention back to the body, this heart, this mind, what's happening here. It's like coming down back to the earth, touching the earth. We are in a situation here where we have these human forms. They are sentient, they are alive, they are connected with the mind, with all the levels of the mind, of mentality, from the most unconscious to the superficial verbal level, thinking level. When we investigate the body, we get to investigate the mind. And when we investigate the mind and body, through insight, we can really see where there are defilements that are to be uprooted, where there are dark spaces, ignorance can be unearthed, discovered, brought to light through our body contemplation, contemplating the breath, observing the thinking mind and how it operates, observing the state of mind, observing the heart, the emotional world. Let these teach us, let these reveal to us where we're caught up in identification and where we're swayed by greed, hatred, and confusion. So in our meditation practice, there is that danger of getting caught up in samadhi, in peace, in stillness, and cleaving to that. And so then there is an encouragement here to turn the attention, come back to the body, and embrace the fullness of this situation. Learn from our humanity, this human mind, this human heart and body, this human experience. Let the Dharma reveal itself through nature, the nature here, that which we can experience, that which we can know. And so we're getting closer to the heartwood. This the Buddha described as the softwood. Coming closer, we develop insight, we develop knowledge, we develop wisdom. We start to really appreciate the way things are. We get to really contemplate anicca, dukkha, anatta, the constant change here, letting go all the time of any sense of permanence, any sense of self, recognizing the inherent unsatisfactoriness of this situation. We can only recognize the dukkha when we are willing to look at it, to feel it, to be present, when we're willing to be embodied, when we're willing to appreciate how the mind is, how the heart is, what's here for us. It's like going into a house, and rather than just sitting in the top story in a lovely breeze with the windows open and it's all very peaceful, this samadhi aspect of our practice, it's like going through all the rooms in the house, from the top right down to the deep cellar, where it might be really dark and maybe full of clutter and maybe dirty, and to be bringing the light in there and cleaning up. This is vipassana. This is the fullness of our meditation practice. And so to investigate the nature here is to appreciate the softwood, is to grow in wisdom, is to let go of all the sense of self, to let go of the sense of permanence, to let go of the sense of relishing this experience. The more we look at what's actually here for us, the more we're embodied, the more we can recognize dukkha, unsatisfactoriness, old age, sickness, and death, constant change, nothing stable, nothing reliable here. And we get to investigate the Four Noble Truths. We can start to notice where there is suffering here, and what is the cause of that suffering? The cause of that suffering, that argument with the way things are, that wish for it to be different, that wish for more of the same, that is desire, the wish for it to be different, that is aversion, and the confusion that underlies these movements for and against. So we get to appreciate the Buddha's teachings in their fullness here in the softwood when we're developing knowledge and vision, jnana-dasana, when we're developing insight, developing wisdom. The Buddha said this is like coming to the softwood, but we're still not at the heartwood. We still haven't come to the essence of the practice, friends. And if we're not careful, we can fall short of that essence, because we can rest in this knowledge and insight. We can rest in this sense of well-being that develops, the sense of being a wise one, of seeing things clearly. We can notice how we're caught up in this when we have any sense of knowing more than others, any sense of others not being quite as wise as we are, any sense of resting on our insights. And this can happen for all of us. We can become a bit lazy. We have some sort of breakthrough in our practice and we realize, oh, now I understand how it is. And then we can somehow fall asleep in that. We can get comfortable in that sense of being somebody who's understood the Dhamma, being somebody who's on the path, being somebody who is attained in any way. Let's notice where there's a sense of self creeping in. We have to be very careful, because this tendency to identify with our experience will follow us every step of the way. And it will be ready to jump on our experience, to reify it, to make it me, to make it mine, myself. So let's be very attentive and keep investigating the sense of atta, self, and remembering the Buddha's teaching on anatta, to let go of that, to recognize it's a delusion. And we can get caught up in our attainments in terms of our freedom from degrees of hatred, degrees of desire. As we let go of the defilements, we free up considerably, step by step. And we can again, look at others and feel that we're superior, feel that they're inferior, just noticing that sense of separation, of superiority that can come in relation to the world around us. Ajahn Chah, there's a very beautiful story about him. When he was a very senior monk, he was the abbot of Wat Nong Papong, and he had a number of young lads coming to the monastery to take Samanera ordination. This is something that happens in Thailand. It's very good, happens a lot. Most young men get the opportunity to wear the robes and practice the Vinaya, at least with the 10 precepts of a Samanera for some time. And nowadays, girls also get this opportunity in the Bhikkhuni monasteries. But what it means for the monastics is that you have this um, like a summer camp during the Vasa, usually. A whole load of young ones come to the monastery to live, and the monks and the monastics have to look after them. And there can be a lot of issues around, having to not eat in the afternoon. They can find that very difficult, of course, and all sorts of issues around behavior, and this incredible training that young people get coming to the monastery, often for 2-3 months. It could be less, not usually for much longer than that. And they have this taste of what it is to live the holy life. It's a beautiful, amazing opportunity for young people. And of course, some young people, will come to the monastery in this way, and they will stay. It doesn't happen very often, but it happens often enough. How inspiring. Anyway, Ajahn Chah, as the abbot of Wat Nong Papong, had an influx of samaneras for some time. And one of these samaneras did something. I don't know what happened, but he did something. And Ajahn Chah, as a result of the action or the speech of this young lad, he became irritable. Ajahn Chah had been practicing for so many years. He had great attainments. He was the most senior monk. He was the abbot of a monastery, most senior monk in his area. And so many good people in and out of robes were inclining towards him as their teacher. And he was revered, honored, loved. He was virtuous. He had all the meditative attainments. He had great insight. He was aiming for the heartward. He was practicing well, and he got annoyed with this Samanera. Ajahn Chah, in his biography, speaks about this, that he was so shocked with himself for this defilement getting the chance to not only arise, but sort of root itself in his heart in the form of irritability, annoyance. He was so shocked to discover that he still had this potential to get annoyed, that he went into his kuti that day, straight after the incident, and he disappeared for 10 days. He stayed in his kuti. He didn't come out. He didn't eat. And after 10 days, he came out and resumed his community life. This is such a moving story. Here's somebody who's able to work at such a subtle level with the defilements, not to allow irritability to get any kind of a hold, aiming for the letting go, the freedom from all the defilements. So, we can be very humble about our attainments, such as they are. If we have a little bit less irritability, if we're a bit more peaceful, if we're living a virtuous and wholesome life, if we're generous, if we're focused on the path, if we're aiming for the goal of liberation from all the causes of suffering, letting go of greed, letting go of hatred, letting go of confusion, we can be very humble about this, because there's always more to be done until there isn't. There's always more scrutiny, more opportunities to develop. And what's really notable for me in the story of Ajahn Chah here is that he was immersed in community. He was busy. He was surrounded by devotees, disciples. monastics, lay friends. He was working all the time in community, offering generously the Dhamma, teaching, guiding, supporting others, and still doing his own practice, and still able to humbly give priority to his practice. And so we get to the heartward if we remember to keep letting go. Let go of it all. Let go of any sense of progress whatsoever, friends. Let go of any sense of understanding path. Let go of any sense of knowing anything at all. Whatever the path, whatever we think is path, it is always other than that. And in this way, we can keep directing our energies, tweaking, refining, fine-tuning our practice again and again. Let's not think we've understood yet. Let's call it a work in progress. Let's have beginner's mind. Be humble and keep learning from everything. And in this way, we're aiming for the heartward. And of course, the heartward, the essence of our spiritual path, is the unshakable deliverance of the heart. It is the heart that is not moved anymore, that is not ruffled, that is not disturbed, because it is a heart that is free from greed. There's no vestige of desire here. There's no trace of aversion. There's no longer any confusion. To aim for this, and to aim for the heartward, is to seek out through our practice, constantly noticing where any desire arises, where any negativity, aversion comes in, or any confusion. And we can best do this, I find myself, through investigating this body, investigating the mind, practicing vipassana, practicing for insight. Allow ourselves to experience peace when peace arises, and be willing to let go of that peace, to keep investigating. Investigate the Dhamma. Investigate here, investigate the responses and reactions that happen, and investigate then all that's around us, which is just nothing more than a mirror. It's like a mirror for our own inner cleansing. And so in this way, we are aiming for the heartward, not to settle for anything less than that. The Buddha said, this is the permanent, this is the perpetual freedom, this is the unchanging freedom. In Pali, asamaya vimokkha, asamaya vimutti, asamaya, that which does not change, this freedom, this release. And when we experience this, we know it, and we know that the work has been done. But before and until we have this experience, keep aiming. We want to keep aiming for the heartward by letting go of any sense of achievement, attainment, any sense of well-being, any sense of peace, any sense of goodness, any, in short, identification with this process. There is a path, but there's no one on the path. It's so true. And so we want to remember to keep letting go. And in this way, not this, not that, not trusting the mind, not trusting the sense of attainment, not trusting the well-being, just to keep investigating the Dharma, again and again, coming back to this embodied human mind and heart, and see, what's happening now? How is it now? Humbly present, fully, intimately engaged with all the levels of experience that we can have, and with this compass set on Nibbana, on the freedom from greed, hatred, and delusion. That is the path of practice. That is this great gift of the Buddha. Everyone. So thank you so much for your patient listening and for your practice. I'd like to have a little look at the chat. We have a bit of time to share now on Dharma Together. Thank you for sharing in this way of making comments, observations, asking questions in the chat. So good morning, friends. Recognizing some familiar names. Very, very happy to know that you're here, as it were. Thank you for your kind comments. I'd like to highlight comments here from Rebecca. Thank you, Rebecca, who says, growing up in a Catholic household, the teachings for lay people on the dangers of wealth and status are really clear. That's great. And she goes on to say, the suttas seem to be more encouraging of accumulating wealth for lay people. I feel some conflict about this. Can you clarify? Thank you, Rebecca. It's interesting that you pick up that sense of wealth being highlighted or praised in the Buddha's teaching. It's interesting, though, to note that the Buddha taught on karma, cause and effect, that if we are generous, open-handed, not stingy, sharing all that we have, then the result of that is wealth. And so in this way, Buddhists, practice generosity, knowing that this is the seed, this is the cause of actually having enough. To be willing to give away is to really give ourselves that gift. And also, we can consider the Buddha teaching that to really practice the path fully is to live the holy life, and to live the holy life is to give up all our wealth and possessions. And so we can really appreciate the encouragement here to have the right attitude towards wealth and possessions, or all these things that we acquire. The Buddha does not give great importance. The most importance they have is the importance of the opportunity they give us to practice generosity. So I would say that wealth is not really highly praised as a way of practice. Acquiring wealth and enjoying wealth is not highly praised, but those who have wealth, there's an appreciation that they have good karma, they have fortunate conditions due to past causes, and those past causes are wholesome, generosity, being connected with acquisition of wealth in this moment due to past acts of generosity, no doubt. There's also a wonderful sutta I really love called Ratthapala Sutta that comes to mind. Ratthapala was a young man who became a monastic, and he practiced for liberation, for the heartward, and he became an arahant. And he returned back to his parents and family in order to generously share Dharma with them as much as he could. And they were quite impervious in some ways to his gift of Dhamma. They simply wanted him to come home, get married again, have children, and inherit the family wealth. And so, because they were not really appreciating what he had to show them in terms of his life and practice, they were not so interested in the Dhamma. He said to them, the best thing that you can do with your wealth, that you're trying to give back to me, that you're trying to entice me with, they actually piled up. Story goes in the sutta, they piled up all the wealth. So literally all the gold and silver and money and all the stuff that they had all the bits and pieces that they had through their acquisition of wealth. They literally piled it all up to show him and to try to entice him and tempt him to come back to the household life and be rich like them again. And he said, the best you can do with all of this is to take all these piles of gold and silver and coins and fancy things and put them in a big cart. And if you then take that big cart to the river Ganges, then you would want to throw all of that stuff into the river Ganges. That would be the best thing you could do with your wealth. In this story, there's an appreciation that his parents were not particularly generous. So I guess he was kind of not encouraging them to give it all away, because perhaps that's something they wouldn't appreciate being invited to do. But this invitation to get rid of it is such a powerful teaching, right? That he was really saying to them, this is not in your interest to have all of this stuff. What would be best for you is if you actually could let it go. So I think this is a fundamental teaching also from an arahant, from the time of the Buddha, a way we can contemplate our relationship to material wealth and how to recognize its value and its danger. Thank you so much, Rebecca, for your comments. Very much appreciate it. And it's really wonderful that in the Catholic tradition that there is this emphasis on the dangers of wealth. Charles Lee, hi Charles Lee, has some comments here that I'd like to share. Here we go. This topic sounds like the danger of the current commercial focus on mindfulness and meditation as merely a means to treating burnout and improving work performance. Thank you, Charles Lee. You've reminded me, yeah, so thank you. I want to come back to that. Yes, it is true. We can see, can we not, how we can settle for less than the final goal, the ultimate goal, the unshakable deliverance of the heart. We can certainly easily settle for less, and many of us do. You know, it's like my initial experience of meditation, where I was so ready to settle for peace because it was so delightful and I was so unaccustomed to this degree of relaxation, quietude, well-being. So look, it's almost like a given in a way, I think, Charles Lee, that we will settle for less unless we're willing to keep reminding ourselves of the practice, goal of the practice, keep reminding ourselves of the Buddha's teachings, listening to the Dharma, being willing to acknowledge that we're still struggling, that we don't have the full picture, that we may even be a bit in the dark here and we're seeking guidance, and to keep doing that. And all of us, I mean, right now I might be speaking on Dharma to you, but I will also be listening to the Dharma that is spoken by others continually as much as possible in order to see where I can learn and where things can be elucidated and where ignorance can be uncovered. You know, there's always space and time for that if we practice well. And so, yeah, we can get caught up in the well-being that manifests for us, in the, not feeling so stressed, in being able to work more efficiently, in being able to function in the world more efficiently, in being able to have better relationships and so forth. Of course, these are all traps for us, and there's nothing inherently wrong with the improvement in our situation as it comes. We can be grateful, we can be glad, we can be joyful that our lives are improving through the practice. But the danger, of course, is that we then attach to that improvement, attach to that new me, that happier me, this wonderful life that I'm now having, and to just keep recognizing the need to let go of the sense of self, root it out, friends, do away with it, come to real freedom, real peace, and real happiness, which are so available to us if we're willing to keep investigating the Dharma and keep walking the path, keep letting go. Thank you, Charlesley, very much for this comment. And Charlesley goes on to say, you've reminded me that right concentration is just one part of the Eightfold Path. Yeah, I should use the practice of right concentration to help me see Dharma clearly, such as not self. And he goes on to say, thanks, Charlesley, is this danger why jhana practice is not commonly taught to lay persons? I did a jhana retreat once and experienced a lot of striving and comparing minds. And he goes on to say, how does one enter and exit the different jhanas and use them to develop insights? Are there certain insights that tend to arise in connection with certain jhanas? Thank you, Charlesley. This is all wonderful. I really appreciate your contribution. And here we have, yes, first of all, it is so important, isn't it? Yeah, to recognize that Sama Samadhi, right concentration or immersion or stillness, is one aspect of the Eightfold Path, because it is so easy to make too much of this because of the effect it can have on us. As I was just saying, this beautiful sense of peace and well-being that we can experience to all sorts of degrees, profound degrees of equanimity, can be experienced through our samadhi practice. And it is so helpful to have these experiences, but always we must remember, not me, not mine, and to let go, to be willing to relinquish, to notice, therefore, in doing that, to notice where we get attached, where we lean towards, where we long for, even yearn for that peace that we may have experienced in a retreat, and we just want to keep recreating that. This is a danger. This is making too much of Sama Samadhi. Even this is to be let go of. And we want to consider the Eightfold Path, consider the Sila, consider the mental development through right effort, through right mindfulness, and also consider the wisdom aspects of path. What is our intention? What is the right view? That is, keep investigating the Four Noble Truths. All of these aspects of path need to be balanced. And our work, in a way, is to just keep noticing these 8 path aspects and how we can integrate and balance and rebalance and refine and allow each of them to help each of the others, so that all 8 aspects, right speech, right action, right work, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration, yes, right view, right intention, how all of these work together and promote and support one another. We don't want to miss out on any of these aspects. We want to use all of them. It's like the wheel with the 8 spokes. They all have to be equal in order for the wheel to move forward. So I really appreciate you highlighting this point. And yep, use right concentration to enable us to have a mind that's peaceful enough to really dive into the embodiment experience, to dive into the experience of all the aspects of our being: emotion, thought, feeling, body, breath. Let these be thoroughly investigated with this degree of samadhi, the degree of focus that enables us to be present for this investigation. Thank you, Charlesley. And so also then, yeah, jhana practice is not commonly taught, it's true. There may be a number of reasons for that, but I can appreciate also, just like you, Charlesley, the experience of doing retreats where one is aiming for deep states of samadhi, for jhana, for the letting go, of the body, letting go of the defilements, immersing in the stillness that we can experience through meditation practice, and how that can set us up, because we can then be striving, yearning and longing and aspiring and wanting to experience these states that we've read about or that we may have experienced before, that are not available when we strive, that are not attainable when we are longing for them. And we have to learn, often through painful experience, how states of deep immersion are not available. They're not at our beck and call. We can set up the conditions to enable us to experience these states, but it is not the goal, and it is not something we want to give a lot of energy towards, because that is to miss the point that every experience is teaching us. If we wake up to path, we want to learn from all experiences. We do not want to control the world. We don't want to expect or make any particular conditions. We want to be flowing with life. We want to let go of controlling. We want to recognize that life has its own way of teaching us. The Dharma is the way it is. It is nature. It is the natural flow of things. And so we don't need to seek particular states of peace and well-being in our meditation practice. We want to open our hearts to the way it is. And so we are willing to work with samadhi, but not make it important to the extent that we forget about the other aspects of the path. Yeah, to do a jhana retreat is to set ourselves up for disappointment often, and yet it's also beneficial to allow ourselves to learn about sama samadhi on occasion in these ways. Just let's remember that the path is so much more full and rich, and the aim of the path is not peace, but unshakable freedom from suffering. Unshakable freedom from greed, hatred, and delusion. We have to work with insight. We have to uproot the defilements. We can't do that if we're dwelling in peace and ignoring a lot of what's actually happening here. Thanks, Charlesley. How to enter and exit the different jhanas and use them to develop insights. We're just about out of time, but I'm going to see what I can say briefly about this. Yes, we can definitely use the jhana for insight, to enter and leave, as it were, to come and go. For these jhana states to come and go, we can create conditions, and we can learn how to enter and emerge from different states of stillness, of peace, different jhana. We can do that. And for some people, it comes very naturally. For most people, not. It's not so important to get skilled at surfing the jhana, but we can definitely, if these experiences manifest for us, experiences of peace and stillness, of well-being, of equanimity, then we can, on coming out of those states, we can learn so much about reality, about the potential for the mind, about the possibilities for peace, and we can be willing to work with whatever arises for us after experiencing jhana, to see what's happening now. And there's so much that we can let go of. There's so much that we can learn through these experiences, but they are not essential for the path. They are like a, as I said, like a byproduct, and everything's teaching us. And so we can recognize, especially in the formless jhana, that these are aspects of reality that we can appreciate, having experienced infinite space, nothingness, infinite consciousness, neither perception nor non-perception. These are realities that we can, in a way, open to if the conditions are right, which will, of course, inform us in our practice, and more than anything, help us to let go, help us to let go of sense desire, help us to let go of identification with samsara. Thank you, Chelsea. I could say an awful lot more, but I think I better stop here. And Anna Maria Rossi, where can we reach you? Thank you, Charles Lee. Yep, there's a website, and I have talks on the website. All the talks I give and sharings are on the website, so you're so welcome. It's there for people to access and just take whatever's useful for you, with my great blessing and appreciation for your practice. So thank you everyone for your attention. Let's focus on the heart word. We can conclude with 3 sadhus. Appreciation for our teacher, the Buddha. Sadhu, 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 anu